علي ولي الله غضب العلوي تفجر الله أكبر حيدر 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 الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله لا إله إلا الله علي ولي الله.
Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. Now in this episode I would like to focus on the arguments used from within Shia Hadith in order to deal with some of the objections used in support of levelling the graves. And these are the narrations that our opponents often like to present. Now such narrations do exist, and they also likewise exist within Sunni Hadith literature. And interestingly, their scholars have given similar explanations to the Shias. Now, there's no doubt throughout history some communities and cultures introduced certain innovations, and graves were venerated and images were used for the purpose of idolatry. In fact, these were acts during the times of Jahiliyyah, and there was a period in Islam that such practices were eradicated. But in order to confuse the masses, people tried to present those particular incidences and occasions as mentioned in the hadith, and try to use it as a general rule and apply them till today. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you some of these traditions. The first hadith I'd like to present, hadith number 1, and this is taken from Wasail al-Shia from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and I have titled this Breaking the Image and Killing the Dogs. Okay? Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said in Wasail al-Shia, as recorded in Wasail al-Shia in the chapter of decorating houses with images, the chief of believers, Imam Ali alayhi salam, said, the Messenger of Allah, may peace and blessings be upon him, sent me to tear down the graves and break the images. So bear this in mind. To tear down the graves and break the images. The next narration, again, this is from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and this is also recorded in Wasail al-Shia, same chapter, decorating the houses with images, and it's also narrated by Jannat Al Baqi in his 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗟𝗢𝗪. And this hadith is from Imam Sadiq, and the same tradition. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali alayhi salam said, the Messenger of Allah sent me to Medina. So now this is a bit more detailed. The Holy Prophet sent Imam alayhi salam to Medina and said, do not leave any image but that you have erased it, nor a grave but that you have levelled it, nor a dog but that you have killed it. So now, what do we learn from these traditions? These two traditions are pretty much identical, but the second tradition gives us some more insight in terms of when did this take place. Now there's some interesting points that we need to learn from this. Firstly, this was not a permanent ruling, and we don't go around killing dogs. And since the hadith was specific to a certain incident in Medina, we know this since dogs are permitted for safeguarding, as we know from hadith. Dogs are permitted for safeguarding. In fact, they're even allowed to be used for the purpose of hunting. So if this was a general rule to be applied at all times, this means we'd be left with no dogs. We'd be going around killing dogs left, right and centre. But these traditions also exist within the books of Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So when you ask our brothers from Ahl-Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, according to your authentic traditions, ordered the killing of dogs. What excuses do they use? They say, oh no, these were certain types of dogs, they had some sort of disease, and the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, ordered the Sahaba to go and kill them. But was this a general ruling at all times? No, it wasn't. Likewise, we have other hadith. For example, there's a famous hadith of 𝗙𝗢𝗟𝗪, which is often used to prove that muta had been forbidden. In the very same tradition, we find the Holy Prophet forbid eating garlic. Now, is this a general rule that we apply all times? No, it's not. We say it was related to that particular moment, and the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, forbid eating garlic on that particular occasion. And likewise, when the Prophet ordered Imam Ali alayhi salam to destroy the images and level the graves, it was in reference to certain types of graves, and these graves were those graves which were built up by some people who were living in the period of Jahiliyyah, or graves of the mushrikeen, included from the Jews and the Christians. Now, let's come to another tradition which actually proves that an image of some kind was permitted upon the graves. So this is from Ali ibn Ibrahim, from his father, from Ibn Abi Umair, from Umar ibn Azina, from Zurara, from Abu Ja'far, having said, Rasulullah used to do a special thing with the one who died from the clan of Bani Hashim. So the Prophet belonged to the clan of Bani Hashim, and when members of the Bani Hashim used to pass away, he used to do something special. What was that something special? Let's have a look. When he prayed Salah upon a Hashimi and sprinkled the grave with water, he would place his hand upon the grave until his fingers would be seen in the clay. So the Prophet used to actually physically put his hand on the graves of the people of Bani Hashim. Now, if the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, had this as a general rule that he must remove all images, why is he placing his handprint on a grave? Isn't this an image? But hold on, he previously said remove all images, but then he himself, he makes this an exception. He makes this an exception for who? The people of Bani Hashim. So we know that this rule about removing the images, it was only for a particular occasion in history, and later we see this change slowly taking place. And this is mentioned in Surah Kafi, volume 3, the book of funerals, chapter 66, hadith number 4, page number 30. That's in the English edition, and this tradition has been graded as Hasan in Murat al-Aqud, volume 14, page number 11 by Lama Majlisi II. So this tradition is authentic, that the Holy Prophet used to go there, he used to put his handprint on the grave and used to mark it as an image. There was an image of the hand of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. And Sheikh Hadi Najafi, in his book Usulat Hadith Al-Bayt, volume 9, page number 300, has also authenticated this tradition as being Sahih. Now we'll come to the second tradition, and this is about elevating the graves. So before we had flattening the graves, now we have elevating the graves. This is on the authority of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who said, my father Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam said during his day of illness, when I die, bathe me and shroud me, and raise my grave by 4 fingers, and sprinkle it with water. So now, in the previous narration, we had the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, instructing to flatten graves. And now we have Imam Sadiq alayhi salam saying that his father said that when I'm going to pass away, may peace and blessings be upon him, raise my grave by 4 fingers. So, do we flatten or do we raise? So now we need to reconcile these traditions. Interestingly, Sheikh Tusi says graves should be 4 fingers above the ground, no dirt, other than the dirt of the grave should be placed on it, which is fine, no problem. I mean, this is regarding the initial process after burial, and all Muslims, in fact, act on this. And this similar tradition mentioned in the books of Al-Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Our Sunni brothers also have similar narrations. And the truth is, reality is, nothing's actually done until the grave settles. You know, you wouldn't start building over a grave. Not literally, as we will come to later on to deal with, but you wouldn't start doing any type of work on a grave immediately. You would give it time to settle, and elevating the graves to 4 fingers is a general principle, and it allows the people to know where the person is buried. I mean, for God's sake, if you're levelling the graves, how would you know most after 3-4 days of rain or wind where the person is buried? Unlike what these people do, try to justify their actions by saying level the graves. No, you don't level the graves, you elevate the graves, and according to the tradition, by 4 fingers. Now let's look at some other traditions that permit permit actually doing some type of work on the actual grave itself. So this is from Surah Kafi, volume 3, the book of funerals, chapter 64, hadith number 3, page 227 in the English edition. Imam Ali alayhi salam made a slab. He made a slab to be put on the grave of the Holy Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. So I said, what's your view if the man were to make a brick to be upon him, to place of bricks upon him? Would it harm the deceased? And Imam Ali alayhi salam said no. Ali alayhi salam is telling one of his close companions, Aban ibn Taghlib, that look, it's permitted to even place a brick on the actual grave itself. Now we'll come to hadith which is don't build on a grave, which you often hear. Don't build on a grave. And this tradition, again, is from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He said, do not build upon the graves and do not make images on the roof of the houses, for the Messenger of Allah disliked it. So notice, it's a dislike here. Not something which is even forbidden, it's a dislike, something which is disliked. This is in Wasail Shia and the chapter of decorating the house with images. And it's been narrated in some other sources. Another tradition from Ali ibn Abi Ja'far asked Abu al-Hasan Musa al-Kazim about building upon the graves and sitting. Now, they often try to misinterpret this tradition. When it says sitting, it doesn't actually mean sitting near the graves, because we know many of the Sahaba themselves sat next to graves. What it actually means is physically sitting on the graves, because there's certain ethics required when you visit a cemetery. I mean, for one thing, we know is that when it comes to cemeteries, you're not supposed to make it a place of celebration, or as a place of Eid, as we've got some other traditions, interestingly, where the Prophet said, the Prophet may peace and blessings be upon him, said, do not make my grave a place of celebration. So when it comes to visiting the cemetery, there's certain ethics involved, and amongst them ethics is that you don't sit on a grave. Okay, so the hadith is Ali ibn Ja'far asked Abu al-Hasan Musa al-Kazim about building upon graves and sitting on them. He said, one cannot build upon it and sit and plaster and clay over it. And this has been narrated by Shaykh al-Tusi in his book Tahzib al-Aqam, volume 1, chapter 23, page 461, hadith number 148, and also in the book Al-Istabra, chapter 128, page 217, hadith number 1, and Wasail Shia, and so forth. It's been mentioned in a few books, and the tradition is an authentic tradition which has been quoted as support to legitimize, not building on graves and making some type of roof or image above them. Now we will look at some traditions in contrary to this about building on the graves. So when we're talking about building on the graves, what do we mean by this? We don't mean literally, because this is what the hadith is actually saying. If people read between the lines, they'll understand it, and they need to stop misusing our traditions. You can't stand on a grave, you can't prostrate on a grave, you can't sit on a grave, you can't build on a grave. Okay? And let's have a look at some of these traditions. Usul al-Kafi, volume 3, the book of Salah, chapter 48, hadith number 14, page number 14 in the English edition. Ibn Abu Umair, from one of his companions, who said to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, I dislike praying Salah in the masjids of the general Muslims. So a companion of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said that I dislike going to mosques that the common Muslims go into. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, don't dislike it. Don't dislike it. For there is none from a masjid except that it's built upon a grave of a prophet or a successor of a prophet. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is telling his companion that, look, don't stop yourself from going to a masjid because the common Muslim goes there, because you dislike it. Because wherever a mosque is built, that is a grave of a prophet or a successor of a prophet. So now, if we look at the previous narration and this particular narration, we could see a slight difference in understanding here, or at least we could say there's a slight exception that's definitely given. And we'll discuss that exception in a moment. Another tradition, and this is narrated from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, having said, Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam, so Prophet Ismail alayhi salam buried his mother and built a chamber upon it. So a prophet is building a chamber above his mother's grave, lest the grave of his mother Ismail alayhi salam, the grave of the mother of Ismail alayhi salam, be trampled upon by those who perform tawaf. And as you know, if you look at the current picture of the Kaaba itself, it's actually circulated by graves. Yeah, there's a portion of the Kaaba which has actually got graves in there. And this tradition is authentic. Allama Muhammad Taqi Majlisi, the father Allama Majlisi, in his book Rawdatul Muttaqeen, volume 4, page number 17, and his son Allama Majlisi, credited as Hassan in his book Maratul Uqul, volume 17, page 46. So here we have a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala building a chamber above the grave of his mother as a protection so people would not trample over it. Let's have a look at what 𝗙𝗙𝗟𝗪𝗪 says about this. 𝗙𝗙𝗟𝗪𝗪, he narrates a tradition on the authority of Safwan al-Jamal, who said, when I was transporting Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq to Kufa to meet Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, he alayhi salam said to me, O Safwan, tie the camel, for this is the grave of my grandfather, meaning Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. So I tied the camel. He then got off the camel and washed himself, changed his clothes and took off his shoes and said to me, copy me. He then started walking towards the hills. He then said to me, take shorter steps and look down to the ground, for you will be rewarded for each step with 100,000 good deeds, and 100,000 bad deeds will be removed from you, and your rank will be elevated 100,000 times, and 100,000 of your wishes will be fulfilled, and the reward of every truthful who has died and every martyr who has been killed will be written for you. He then continued walking, and I walked with him. We were walking with tranquility and gravity, glorifying and sanctifying Allah, testifying with the Shahadatain until we reached the hills. The narrator then mentions the ziyarah until he says, and then he, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, gave me some dirhams and I rebuilt the grave. So here we have the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam themselves giving money to building the grave of not only their his great-great-grandfather, but the first holy Imam Ali alayhi salam. Because as we know, the grave of Imam Ali alayhi salam was kept hidden until the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who made it known to the public. So what do we conclude? We conclude that masjids were built over places in which prophets and the successors lay buried. The second point is that Ismail alayhi salam, he built a chamber over his mother's grave, and till today there is still some type of construction around her grave, which is located besides the Kaaba. And finally Imam Sadiq alayhi salam gave money to rebuild the grave of Imam Ali, I believe. This is from Imam Baqir alayhi salam, from his father Imam Sadiq, narrates that the Prophet said, don't take my grave as a masjid, nor as a place of worship, for indeed Allah has cursed those who took the graves of prophets as places of worship. It's funny, just look at Masjid al-Nabawi, the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him, is buried there. This is from Sheikh Saduq Jannat Al Baqi, volume 1, page 178, hadith 532. Imam Majlisi is also recorded his book Bahar al-Nawar. And the Prophet said, don't take my grave as a qibla, nor as a place of worship, for indeed Allah the Almighty cursed the Jews who took the graves as the prophets as places of worship. This is from book Sheikh Saduq's Jannat Al Baqi, volume 1, page number 178, hadith number 532. Also Imam Majlisi in Bahar al-Nawar, volume 79, page 20, and volume 80, page 313. Now let's have a look at the commentary of this hadith and how the scholars have explained this. Shaheed al-Awwal Muhammad ibn Makki al-Amli, the famous Shia scholar, classical scholar, he says that Sheikh Saduq and the two sheikhs, meaning Sheikh Kulaini and Sheikh Tusi, and a group of later scholars in their books, and they have not accepted a grave. And there's no doubt that Imamiyya have a consensus on the contrary to the two of these issues. The first being the issue of building upon graves, and the second one is prayers next to them, especially when it comes to the holy shrines. So it's possible to discredit these narrations due to the fact that they were singular narrations, meaning isolated, and indeed narrations which are far famous contradict them. For example, Ibn Junayd, may Allah be pleased with him, says, there is no issue in building upon the graves and placing a tent upon them to protect them and those who visit them. It's also possible that these were exceptions to the general rule, as I mentioned before at the start, based on the majority, because this was done, meaning the structuring of the graves, at the times of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam, who were present among the people, and also after that, without any opposition, meaning there was no opposition to this from neither from the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt al-Islam and the scholars, later scholars. And also based on reports about respecting the grave and building them and the superiority of performing prayers next to them. And these reports are in abundance from among them, which include the following. For example, Shaykh Tusi has narrated in his book of 𝗙𝗪𝗟 through Imam Sadiq alayhi Islam from his forefathers, the Prophet said to Imam Ali, O Abul Hassan, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made your grave and your son's grave places of paradise. Allah made the hearts of the lead of his creatures and servants long for you and endure humility from their opponents and harm in your cause. And harm in your cause. They will construct shrines and visit them plentifully, seeking with the closeness to Allah and to His Messenger. O Ali, those are the ones who will earn my intercession. They are the ones who will drink from the lake fount, and they will be my visitors tomorrow in the heaven. O Ali, those who help construct your graves and take care of them are considered as if they helped Sulaiman ibn Dawood alayhi salam build the house of His Holiness. For whoever visits your grave, Allah inscribes the rewards of 70 performed pilgrims. They all return to their homes free of sins, as if they were just born. Very interesting hadith this is. And indeed many people, he says, then he continues, Shaykh al-Awwal says, indeed many people of al-Hadith, meaning the traditionalist scholars, not al-Hadith of the Salafis of course, and indeed many of the al-Hadith traditionalists have reported this. And al-Hafiz ibn Asakir, from among the scholars of the general masses, meaning the Sunnis, has mentioned the wrongdoings of those wretched people. Shaykh al-Mufid, may Allah be pleased with him, says, and it's been indeed narrated that there is no problem to pray towards Qibla in a place where there is a grave of an Imam. I mean, there's no problem with praying in a place where the Imam is present, meaning the grave of the Imam is present. The visitor should then pray next to where the head of the Imam is located, and this is better, something which is recommended. And Shaykh Tusi says, and it's been indeed narrated, the permissibility of praying towards the graves of the Imams, especially in optional prayers. Here what it means is, as in when you're standing beside the Imam's grave and you facing Qibla, it's recommended, and it's recommended to stand towards the right side of the head of the Imam, or in some cases even behind the actual shrine itself, because one would not stand before the Imam since he is the Imam, and we out of respect and courtesy toward the Imam, they will stay slightly back. Shaykh al-Awwal says, I say that the report is what he narrates in 𝗙𝗪𝗟 through his chain to Muhammad ibn Abdullah al-Hamiri, who said, I wrote to one of the representatives of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, asking about a man who visits the graves of the prophets. Is it permissible for him to do sajda upon the grave or not? And is it permissible for someone who prays to stand behind the grave, placing the grave in front of him like a qibla, direction of prayer? So he replied, as about sujood upon the grave, it's not permissible, neither in optional nor obligatory prayers, nor in ziyarah. However, he can put his right cheek upon the grave. As about, and we will talk about the placing the cheek on the grave as well later in the next episode, inshallah. As about prayers, then he can stand behind it, and it's not permissible to pray in front of him, meaning in front of the Imam alayhi salam's grave, because it's not allowed to proceed ahead of the Imam. He should rather pray in his right or left side. And al-Mufid has narrated from Ibn Qulaway through a chain from Ibn Abi Umair from Imam Baqir alayhi salam, saying, performing one obligatory prayer next to the grave of Imam Hussain is equal to one umrah. And through this chain from Abi al-Hamiri from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, who said, whoever comes to him and visits him and prays next to the grave of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, then it's equivalent to one hajj, and one umrah will be written for him. And through another chain from Al-Kuki from Al-Sadiq alayhi salam, saying, no one prays next to him unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts it from him, and no one supplicates next to him supplication unless it will be granted for him either immediately or with delay. And the narrations about this topic are plenty. Shaheed al-Awwal says, and despite the grave of the Messenger of Allah has been constructed in most centuries, and it's not been reported from anyone from amongst the predecessors who has rejected this act. They'd rather have considered this as a means of revering him, meaning the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. As about taking the graves as masjid, it has been said that this is for those who pray there in congregation. As about praying alone, then there's no issue. And this is in the book Zikr al-Shia fi 𝗙𝗙𝗟𝗟𝗪, volume 2, page number 37 until page number 39. So this is the explanation Shaheed al-Awwal gives in reference to those traditions. Now I just want to give a bit of a side topic, what the Sunnis have said in reference to this hadith as well, about may God curse the Jews and Christians who have taken the graves as places of worship. Mullah Ali Qari, the famous jurist, Hanafi scholar, he says regarding this, the reason for cursing them was because they used to prostrate on the graves of the prophets to praise and respect them, and that is clear shirk. Or they used to pray to Allah on the graves of the Prophet, and they used to prostrate on them, and they used to direct their prayers towards the graves, and by that they wanted to worship Allah and respect the Prophet, and that is hidden shirk, because it's a kind of respect for the servant of Allah that's not allowed. But if someone builds a masjid near the grave of an upright person, or prays in the tomb, or intends to ask for help through the spirit of that upright person, or intends to seek blessing from his leftovers, meaning tabarruk, like the person's personal property, etc. If he does that all without the intention of giving him respect or doing tawajjuh towards concentrating on that particular person on the prayer, then there's nothing wrong in that. Don't you see the grave of Ismail alayhi salam inside the Masjid al-Haram near the Hatim, and to pray there is superior than anything else. However, to pray near the graves is only forbidden when the soil becomes dirty because of the uncleanliness of the deceased. In the Hatim, the crescent shaped area that is immediately adjacent to the Kaaba, near Hajar al-Aswad and Mizab, there were graves of 70 prophets. So as you can see, Mullah Ali Qari is actually saying there were graves of 70 prophets, 70 besides the Kaaba. Next time you're praying towards the Kaaba, bear in mind that you have 70 prophets buried around the Kaaba. And this is in the book Marqat Sharh al-Mishkat, volume 2, page number 389. Now, these are again similar narrations, and I think this is the fourth or fifth tradition actually I'm covering now. And this is from Sama bin Mehran, asked Imam Jafar Sadiq about visiting grave sites and building mosques at them, which we've already dealt with. He said there's no issue with visiting the graves, but one cannot build a mosque there. And we've already addressed that, and this is mentioned in Jannat Al Baqi, volume 1, page number 178, hadith number 531. We've addressed that. And Jarrah al-Madani narrated from Imam Abdullah that he said, do not build upon the graves. No problem, we've already explained that. It doesn't mean literally build on the graves. Do not build upon the graves, and do not make images on the roofs, which we've previously covered, because the Messenger of Allah disliked it. This is from the book Kitab al-Mahsin by al-Barqi, volume 2, page number 612. And last but not least, Ali ibn Jafar asked Imam Musa Kazim al-Islam about building upon the graves and sitting by them, meaning sitting on them here, not by them. Okay, one cannot build upon it or sit or plaster or clay over it. We've dealt with that, and that's from Tahzib al-Qam, volume 1, chapter 23, hadith number 148. So as you can see, these three particular narrations have already been dealt with. Just as an additional thing, I just want to mention some last few traditions for the viewers. And this is interestingly from Abu al-Hasan Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam, that when he returned from Baghdad, he went to Medina and his daughter had passed away. So he buried her and ordered one of the servants that he should apply clay over the grave. And this is from Surah Kafi, volume 3, the book of funerals. And this is about applying clay to the grave and plastering it. Hadith number 3, page number 32, chapter 67 of the English edition. One more hadith for the viewers. And this is from Sheikh Tusi, and this is on the authority of Ibn Zayd from Abi Amir, the preacher of the people of Hijaz, saying, I went to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and said to him, what's the reward for those who visit the grave of Amir al-Mu'mineen and builds it? He alayhi salam said, O Abu Amar narrated to me my father from his grandfather, Al-Hussein ibn Ali alayhi salam, that the Prophet said to him, I swear to Allah, you will be killed in the land of Iraq and will be buried in it. Ali alayhi salam said, O Messenger of Allah, what shall someone earn who visits our graves regularly and take care of it? He alayhi salam said, O Abul Hasan, Allah made your grave and your son's grave a place of heaven. Allah made the hearts of his creatures and servants long for you and endure humility and harm in your cause. They will build your graves and visit them plentifully, seeking with a closeness to Allah and His Messenger. O Ali, those are the ones who will earn my intercession. They are the ones who will drink from the lake fountain, and they will be the visitors of tomorrow in heaven. And this hadith is quite a lengthy narration. It's from Tahzeeb al-Aqam, volume 6, page number 2526. And here we can see that in this particular narration, the Prophet foretold Imam alayhi salam that from his supporters and followers there will be those people who will visit his grave regularly, and they were the ones who will help to construct and build graves. And as we know from the previous narration, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was from amongst those who were the first few people who laid the foundations and paid money towards the building of the grave of his great-grandfather. And finally, this is from the famous book Kamal al-Ziyarat by Ibn Qulaway, and this was in the chapter of those who cannot visit the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and this is mentioned in page number 45, hadith number 7. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam actually tells one of his companions that if you're unable to visit the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, then you must follow these particular steps. And amongst these steps, I just want to read the last and final words. It says, the Imam alayhi salam told him, say, I am performing your ziyarat, O son of Allah's Messenger, with my heart and tongue and organs, although I have not performed your ziyarat physically, where I can see your dome. So the Imam alayhi salam, the Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is actually mentioning the blessed dome that's raised above the grave of the Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he's saying this as a means that, look, that I cannot have the honor of seeing your dome, but please accept my prayer and supplication, and this is the method that you must recite it. So as we can conclude from the Shia hadith, the traditions that speak about not building on graves, not prostrating on them, not standing on them, not sitting on them, they're very contextual, there's a context behind them, and in order to understand this topic, you have to really put all these traditions together, understand what's the reason behind it. Was it for a particular period in Islam that it was impermissible, and then later it was permissible, and how the Imams of the Ahl Bayt Islam themselves played a big role in having these graves constructed, and there were certain exceptions. And of course, as I mentioned before, the statement of Mullah Ali Qari, that again, the reason why certain mosques were taken in this way was because people used to actually physically pray towards those graves. And you know, I've mentioned several points here, and I'm sure for the viewers, anybody with sincere mind and open heart who really wants to understand this topic, I'll be more than happy to go in more detail. But unfortunately, because it's quite a lengthy topic, I try to cram up as much information as possible for the viewers, so they can remain no doubt that when it comes to building the graves and visiting the graves and supplicating at the graves, this is all within the Sunnah and the teachings of the Prophet himself, as practiced by the Ahl Bayt al-Islam. Anyway, viewers, I think that's enough for today's show. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share, and tune into the third part, inshallah, next week. Assalamu alaikum.